So I wanted to take just a quick moment to say welcome to everyone who's joining us. Happy early Mother's Day. We're all thrilled to be taking some time to reflect on what life in this pandemic world has meant for us and our families, and we're grateful to have you join us. Our panel today consists of 4 moms with a combined total of 11 kids, and we are all touched by type 1 in some way. Before we begin, I just have a few things to note. It is our goal today to create a safe space for this conversation, but we also recognize that in the grand scheme of this pandemic, the 4 of us really are very lucky to be able to work safely from home, and we do know that many moms are not. So to those on the front line, we're grateful for everything you're doing for all of us, and from the bottom of our hearts, truly thank you. We also want to note that as moms, we're very protective of our kids' privacy, and to honor that, we won't be taking any questions that are specifically related to any one of our kiddos, but pretty much from there, everything else is fair game today. And lastly, due to the size of this get-together, we do have everyone muted and the chat features disabled. However, we really do want to get you involved in the conversation. So there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please use that to send in questions, and I'll be moderating those throughout and sending them off to the ladies. So with that, I want to give everyone a moment to introduce themselves. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you're touched by type 1, and any additional disclosures you need to share for the webinar. So Kerri, if you could kick us off.
Sure thing. So my name is Kerri Sparling. I'm touched directly by type 1. I have type 1 diabetes. I was diagnosed in 1986 when I was 7 years old. So I've had type 1 for 33 years. The background noise you're hearing are my 2 beautiful and wonderful, always well-behaved children screaming at each other from the kitchen. So it's already going well. And I'm the pandemic, and everyone's, so many of us are touched by diabetes, but everybody is touched by the pandemic. And I'm really glad that my job prior to this was in a work from home environment. So transitioning to work from home wasn't as challenging as it was to work from home with some specific coworkers, the aforementioned children outside of my office. That's been a big adjustment. But I'm just really grateful to still have a job. And to the disclosure end of things, so I do work for the Children with Diabetes organization. I'm their editorial director, and I also have a consulting agreement with Tandem Diabetes Care. And so if I'm casually mentioning CWD or I'm casually talking about my insulin pump, those biases are coming into place both emotionally and financially. So, and my son just cheered in the kitchen, so maybe he heard my disclosures, thought they went well, so I'll pass the baton to somebody else.
Melissa Lee.
Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Lee, and I work here at Tidepool. And Tidepool is also a distributed organization where we were already working from home. So similarly to what Kerri was saying, like the challenge is there's all this additional like anxiety and community concerns and having my children around. So I am also touched by diabetes in a personal way. I've had type 1 for 30 years. I was diagnosed when I was 10, so now I'm disclosing that I am 40, which takes me a minute to remember because I'm 40. My kids are 8 and 10, and so we are crisis schooling from home, and my husband and I are both fortunate enough to be able to work remotely for our jobs during this time, and so. Yeah, you will see me look this direction a lot as my children's faces appear in the window because my daughter is currently doing an online baking class. So my oven is on and I don't know what's going to happen. So at least out here, I'm safe from fire. And with that, I'll pass it to Melissa Maniscalco.
Thanks, Melissa. Hi, everybody. I'm Melissa Maniscalco. I also work with Tidepool. We are impacted by type 1. One of my children was diagnosed at 18 months. And he is now 5 years old. We have a total of 5 children. So I took the scales in the children department on this particular, with this particular panel. The ages of my children are 5 and 3. So I'll let you think about that for a second. We have a set of triplets that are 5, and then we had a set of twins that are now 3 years old. So we are in the midst of this pandemic running a full-blown preschool. We were working from home. Both my husband and I worked from home before this pandemic began. It has been a significant transition. Just the noise. We were not accustomed to the absolute noise level all the time. It did not stop. It does not stop today. So inevitably you're going to hear said children. There's been a lot of crying this morning just in preparation for this call. We were working on getting it all out, and hopefully we won't see anyone bust through the door, but it's also highly likely. And my hope for all of you is that my children will be clothed if they do enter this office. Best of luck. Suzanne?
Yep, and I'm Suzanne McKee. I also work at Tidepool. I am touched by type 1 because my daughter was diagnosed a little over 1 year ago. So we are relatively new to this space, but as everybody knows, once you're in, you're all in. So, and these ladies are all better than I am because I actually made my husband take my children outside for a walk during this time. So
it's raining here. I would have done the exact same thing. So.
So thank you again for everyone joining with us. We want to take a quick, we kind of talked about how we're doing, but one check-in, how are you feeling today? And just a word or two, because for me, I know it's a roller coaster. Sometimes I think this is going well, we're handling this, and then other times I just kind of want to stare at the wall for a while. So how's everyone feeling?
I was gonna say, I feel stretched. I feel really stretched. I feel like I had my previous set of commitments, and now I've taken on caring for my own parents. Like there's a responsibility that I have to not just my own family nucleus, but to everyone that touches us. And so, I think in one word, I'm just really feeling stretched, and it's just pacing myself and learning to really pace myself in this new environment has been my challenge.
I think I'm trying to think of a way to find one word that describes it, but I'm trying to find the verb of groceryed. So we've been in lockdown for 8 weeks today, and we haven't gone into any stores. And the first big rush of panic I had, aside from the pandemic itself, was to make sure that there was food and a consistent source of it in my house. And so anytime that there is a grocery store delivery or pickup that we're able to do, I get this weird flush of like, yes, I nailed it. There are eggs in my fridge. I won some kind of weird party game with that. And so that happened yesterday, so I'm still riding that high. And that's also where it gets weird, because that's weird that that's now a new high. So I'm adjusting to things that have now become a priority, and it's also up to my grateful quotient too, because it was stuff that I had the privilege of not having to worry about excessively before, and I think about all of those sorts of things now.
Yep.
That's
along those lines. It's great. The fact that it takes you 2 hours to get, if you're able to get a delivery, like that's their challenge. And we've been in desperate times. We have a family of 7 here in this house, and we can't get the delivery, and we're out of toilet paper. We have to, just the extra and added stress, something that I took for granted in the grocery store, is something, it's a new adjustment.
I feel a little bit like I'm constantly running and not getting anywhere. And so it's like, for instance, this whole morning, like I'm trying to get, if this were a day and it weren't pandemic, I'd be trying to get the kids up, trying to get them to school. And then I'd have a moment where like I've dropped them and I know that they're good, they're safe, they're doing what they need to do. And then I can just like take a breath. And instead I'm like just constantly running to the next thing. Like there's, 4 separate meetings happening on 4 separate, electronic devices, and our internet bandwidth, which we're fortunate to have, is stretched. And we're all like running out to patios and backyards, and like, I'll take my meeting upstairs if you'll stay downstairs, and you'll what, and it's just like, there's a constant running that, you don't get to sort of decompress from in the same way that, like putting my children somewhere else was something that I could do.
Mm-hmm. And I think, there's a common theme here, and Julie put in the Q&A, just one word that I think does wrap it up too, is depleted. You are, life in general, we all get stretched thin at different times, but this is very different in how we are all getting pulled in so many different directions. So, Becky also says it's a rough morning here. She's glad it's Friday, and totally agree about not being able to just kind of take that breath and step back a little bit.
I just have to interrupt and say, I'm really sorry for smirking. I'm listening to everyone and being very serious, but I'm hearing my son announce from a certain room in our house that he needs assistance from the other adult, and it's so loud, and I'm just hoping to God everybody can't hear him asking for help in the potentially the bathroom. I don't know, but I'm like, oh God, please tell me you can't hear that. So I'm really sorry that people were saying serious things, and I was like, oh no.
Yep, that's real. Again, this is not meant to be, a refined production. This is real life, and we're all sharing things. So, so with that, let's bring it into COVID-19 and type 1 and diabetes specifically. You know, everybody is under a lot of duress and stress, and they're worried. But I would like to kind of dig in a little bit about, do you feel that even heavier load because of type 1 and the potential complications with that? And with that, like, how are you talking to your children about that stress so that they can understand it, but not adding to their own stress to protect them from some of that? So Kerri, I was wondering if you could kick us off there.
Sure. So type 1 is, I'm not sure what is the dominant, pandemic stuff is the dominant thought process, and everything falls underneath that. So we have been in lockdown for 8 weeks, I had mentioned, not because our government put us into lockdown 8 weeks ago, but because our family decided that that was the right thing. And then our state happened to follow suit with what we were doing. But we are the family that is not interacting with other people. We are the family that are choosing masks and social distancing, even as things start moving towards reopening, because we are always keeping diabetes, unfortunately or fortunately, at the forefront of what's driving a lot of our decisions. And so we feel like we're being extra cautious and extra careful. But with that caution, not only comes the reassurance that you're doing everything you can, but it also ups the panic quotient of things in my house. And so we're nervous if any interaction doesn't go according to plan. And some of that anxiety is being transferred, at least to my oldest child. I have one 10-year-old and an almost 4-year-old. I know the 10-year-old is picking up on concerns that we have, and we try to talk those through using careful data and careful statistics and always science, but trying to really swallow our own panic. The 4-year-old, they're almost 4-year-old, kind of doesn't register as much of it, other than he knows that there are germies and asks, well, do you have germies? And he would want to get on this video call and ask if you guys have germies, but he knows the germies don't come through the computer. Like, he's processing things in the way that he can. But I found that the biggest challenge for me has been being nervous about how diabetes would affect any outcomes for our house, and trying to keep that nervousness at bay and from invading my mental health in a way that makes it tough for me to function as a human being. I don't have that figured out. If someone does, please tell me. But that's part of the dance that I do, and it undulates. Some days are really good and some days are really tough. Same goes for all the questions people ask, in my family. Some days are tough in that way too.
Yep. Melissa, do you have anything you'd like to share on that? You guys making it hard for me because I have to use your last name to.
I was a little, we did not talk to my kids about the virus. We didn't open up with it. We just, their ages, we just wanted to put them in a bubble and let them just kind of live their lives knowing they're not going to school anymore. As a result, they were still hearing it. They were hearing it from the kids, hearing it like on the TV, or if we were listening to a podcast, and it bubbled up, and actually bubbled up this last weekend to the point where I realized that my kids had big feelings, and they were aware of the virus. Things were, what I hadn't told them was, I explained to them enough or given them enough information. I just said, oh, that store is closed because of the virus. And so they started asking me questions. Well, can we not do that? Can we not do there because of the virus? I'll turn off. I'm gonna try my video, so I hope you can still hear me. But it was, can we not go there because of the virus? And so this weekend we got out water balloons, and I asked my kids about their big feelings as we were filling up these water balloons. And I said, please tell me about, how do you feel about the virus? And then I had them march around the yard with these 50 water balloons and just throw them at each other and say, go away, virus, go away. And getting that aggression out gave me my good children back, because we had reached a point where we were not good. But it gave them a release in a way that I had not tapped into or realized, that they also were having these big feelings and didn't know what to do with them. So it was a lesson for me. In terms of how it's going to affect us in the future, I will say we live in a state that is definitely opening up. And I am nervous about the reaction my kids are going to experience, because we're going to be that family that is continuing to socially isolate in an environment that people aren't going to understand. We don't wear a sign that says, I have an immune disorder, therefore I can't talk to you right now, or I can't be within 6 feet from you. We don't have that. It's not overly obvious, and so we're still working through how to have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that touches on something too that we've talked about before in preparation for today of that, how do we explain that to our kiddos that our family might approach this reopening differently. Our state is also slowly reopening, and the McKee family is not, for a multitude of reasons. And how do we explain that in a way? I had a conversation with my daughter yesterday that we both ended up in tears, but it was good because it was honest and it was real. And then how do you present that in a way that's not scary, that, we don't want them, I'm already worried about if I'm ever going to be willing and ready to go out in public again, but I don't want my children to feel that. So, finding those ways. And I love the water balloon fight. We actually had one with our neighbors over the fence the other day. And it's fun to get some of the aggression out, but also do something normal that feels like something you would do on a hot day. So how about you, Melissa Lee?
Well, I was going to say, I don't think you said how old your daughter is, and that might be helpful for the attendees who might have kids in that same age range, because you've got older ones than we do.
Absolutely. So my daughter is 11. So, and she is, bless her heart, not someone who is going to be okay with the gray area. So I have to go deep. I mean, we have had very serious conversations. She knows what we know about all of it because that's how she can feel safe. Mm-hmm. She doesn't feel good if you just kind of give her a fluff answer, and she can tell, and she's got my number. And she can tell if I'm not sharing all the information that I know. So on the one hand, we can have some fascinating, wonderful, open conversations. On the other hand, we end up sharing some information that is hard because she wants to know black and white answers, and that doesn't exist in this world right now. It's very hard to help answer those questions when none of us know what tomorrow's going to look like, 2 months, 3 months, and so forth. But it's been a wild ride.
For my kids, so we also have been in lockdown since very early March, even before our state was in lockdown. And part of that was actually I got very, very sick the second week of March, and tested positive for flu B, and could not get a COVID test no matter who I called and what I tried, even though I had all the symptoms. So we think it was just flu B. We don't know. It could have been more than that. So we sort of started in a really acute, almost crisis, because shortly after I got sick, my husband and my son had a light version of it. But one of the things that was different for me during this whole crisis is that where diabetes is concerned, is that the very first thing I did when my fever spiked up to 104 was to pack a hospital bag. Because I thought to myself, if I go into the hospital and I have to be admitted, I'm alone, and I'm going to be dealing with my diabetes alone in a way that that may be brand new to me, even in a hospital setting, right? I won't have, oh, I forgot something, can you bring it up, kind of thing, because of the very strict measures around who can visit. And so, like, my mind always goes to, diabetes has made me an over preparer. Kerri and I have a friend named Scott Johnson who talks about the caveman who lived. The caveman who lived is the one that walked out of the cave and thought, what all is going to try to kill me today, and knew how to respond. And so in diabetes, I often go to that very dark, like all the way to the end, have I prepped for that moment? And so the kids kind of started this whole thing with, like, mom is very sick. Like, how do we respond to that? And we just went through the, you can't come in the room where mom is sick. And I was self-quarantining. And then from there, we went into a lot of discussion about the virus in age-appropriate ways for each of my kids. And each of my kids have communication deficits that my daughter is very, very literal. And so being able to walk her through things like the statistics, or like being very analytical about the likelihood if she was to get the virus, and what we would do if she got the virus, and who would be a helper if we were sick, and just walking through the analytical side of it I think helps with any of those big feelings that Melissa was talking about, because when we can, and I think this is, I don't know if they get this from me or if this is part of the way they communicate, but when they can sort of like calculate the actual risk, then that sort of like takes the anxiety about it down a notch. So they've been pretty okay about it all. And they also just get to play a lot of video games. So like they don't think that much about the diabetes side of it, but that's, that's always on me. So.
But one thing that everybody has mentioned already is, whether it's a different version of it or not, that everyone's acknowledging that their kids have really intense emotions, and that their kids get to see that their parents are also having an emotional response to this. So at least it normalizes the fact that your parents are human and children are feeling big feelings, and talking about this stuff, however you decide to go and attack it, is a good thing, because it makes people feel like they can at least really be open with how they're feeling.
Absolutely, and that mirrors a lot of what I'm seeing in the Q&A too. Like Anna's pulling out that this week especially, it's just been a lot of high anxiety and commenting on her son and his summer plans, and that's an interesting time too. This is supposed to be a time when our kids especially are getting really excited for, whether it be vacations that the family's taking, camping trips, summer camps. I mean, those are all getting canceled. They're not happening. And diabetes camp, which is a phenomenal opportunity. It was well, we have one other friend or two other friends that we've been very close with, where my daughter has been able to connect with other kids with type 1. But diabetes camp was the first time she was able to do something on a bigger scale like that with all of these kids. And both my kids went, even, my son who's not type 1, it was his favorite camp of the summer. And,
oh, wow.
and the cancellations are piling up, and we have to keep telling them one more thing got canceled, one more thing. And at this point, we've just, said the summer is going to be us as a family, and we have to find ways to make that fun. But it's a particularly hard time of year to be explaining that to them.
It's for us an opportunity as a family to focus, like to teach my kids about gratefulness, and like, where are we grateful? Like, what opportunities do we have to be grateful? And we're trying to turn into that lesson. We're failing a lot, I'll be honest, but every time we do manage to say, aren't we grateful for that? And everyone can agree, we count it as a win, and it's because for us right now, it's the little wins that are getting us through it.
Yeah, I'll echo that we had my oldest was feeling really crummy yesterday, when we were like, we actually netted out with, aren't you grateful that you have a safe spot to feel like garbage for a couple hours? We're like, hey, okay. Because sometimes you need to be able to feel those feelings too. It's not just about pivoting and immediately saying, but this is why it's going to be okay. It's like, no, if you feel like a garbage can, be that garbage can for a little bit, if that's how you need to deal with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and to that note, like, yeah. Stacy's mentioning in the QA, she just had a recent move, and there's all these things that go along with that. But finding that way, to your point, to let go of some of those things. I mean, we have to be true and real about what we can actually manage. And to that point, I was hoping we could open it up to, I know all of you ladies have some pretty cool hacks and tips and tricks that would really be valuable to share with, how are you getting through things like crisis schooling, the schedule falling apart, that we're not just working from home, business as usual. So, if you have some of those tips you're willing to share, we'd love to hear them.
One thing I want to point out, what Sarah mentioned in the chat, which she and I have actually talked about this quite a bit. She does meetings and things in the car. She goes into the garage, gets into the car, and it is like this safe space of a shell. Like, this is like, we're all looking, we have those closets in our house, those like long trips to the bathroom that I don't know, men have enjoyed for years, right? Like, lock the door and just be like, I'm busy. You see the little hands come under the door. You're like, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So it's, I think one of the things is that, like, you have to find a space in your home where you can just sort of like be alone. And for me, that has become my patio, and I get to have like air on my face, and I get, and then I think about my friends who live in like an apartment in Brooklyn, and it's like, I can't imagine like how much more compressed some of us may feel when you don't have that sort of like, I can't just go relax in the backyard kind of feeling. And we're really lucky here to be able to be like, I'm going outside. I need to be outside.
Yeah. I mean, at my house, my husband and I have both worked from home for a better part of a decade. So we're used to having to triage the kids and their outside needs.
Frozen Kerri for me.
Kerri froze for a moment. So Melissa, do you want to talk while we work on getting her back on some of the tips and tricks you found?
Was I the frozen one? You guys were all frozen, and I was like, "Oh wow,
you're back."
I was like, "They're frozen, poor them." I'm like, "Oh no, it's me."
That's how I always know it's me. I'm like, wait, it can't be literally everyone else.
Wait to see what frozen face the video has chosen. Talking about things to be grateful for, I have found that every time I freeze on a video, I look completely bananas, and is my favorite thing because it's very like, it's awful. So, big fan. I have no idea what you actually heard, but I love all of you, and I'm really glad you're here. What actually came through?
We heard you talking about how you and your husband are used to kind of triaging some of the issues that the kids need from work from home. And then
well, what I was saying was, sorry, we're splitting the day. So I work in the morning and I can predictably block against that time block. And my husband works in the evening and he can predictably block, and he schedules his calls for then. And I try to do mine in the morning. This particular time frame is an overlap time frame. So I definitely, I'll have some demerits for this, but having that is good because then it lets me know that this is the time that my brain can remove itself from parenting mode for just a little bit. And that for my mental health is what I need, because I can't have a constant running clock of kid needs, or else I start to really fail them and myself. And so having a 2-3 hour block of time to work, that brings me a sense of satisfaction that helps power me through the day.
It's a really good point. We've talked about this as a team at Tidepool, of just that, it's very hard to find any of those true heads down moments. And so I love that you've kind of split that out and said, okay, these are my hours, these are your hours, and this is the way that we can manage this, because it's very hard when you're right in the middle of something and then it's mommy, 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 mommy. And you can't avoid that all the time, but if you can find a couple of hours in a day, that's like magic.
And what I said sounded so structured and so, really good job. But what I didn't tell everybody on the live webinar that I told you guys before we started was I currently have a bunch of boxes of yarn shoved in front of my office door to keep my kids out. So it all sounds super scheduled and good job, Sparlings, but we're still winging it. And I have to put stuff in front of my door to keep people from busting open. So if y'all see a whole bunch of yarn come flying at me randomly during the course of it, it's because somebody busted through and the boxes collapsed. So it sounds like, it's very well structured, but it is chaos over here too.
My children's school has of every other parent I've talked to, no one seems to have as high expectations as our kids' school has had. Both of my kids are in elementary, 2nd and 4th grade, and we are measured against certain packets of work that have to be turned in every 2 weeks. We have to, there's this whole handoff that happens with social distancing at the school. And if they don't complete it, they're marked truant against an independent study contract. And so there's all this work. There are online classes. My son comes home with 2 weeks of worksheets in a packet that's like this thick for 2nd grade, which is like a lot. So I find that for me, I've been able to use a lot of productivity tools and project management tools that I might use in my work life to try to very quickly become the best executive assistant to a 2nd grader that you've ever seen. In terms of I set up, there's a tool called Trello, and it's free, and you can just make these little to-do lists. And I've got it where my kids can move the little card from doing, or from to do to doing to done, so that I can know, I just peeked in to see what they're working on. And of course I can also see them running wild, pantsless or whatever. So again, the yarn, that's my version of the yarn thing. It's just because I'm trying doesn't mean I'm succeeding. But one of the things that allows me to do is to say, okay, I know I have important meetings at this time and this time and this time. Those are the times when I'm going to save, they can go play their video games during that time, and I don't want to see them. Mm-hmm. And then if I'm doing something that's maybe a quieter activity, I'm working on a document or something, that's a good time for them to be next to me with worksheets or something, so we can all work simultaneously. And then when they have something more intensive where they actually need my support in understanding a new concept, like the whole teaching part of teaching that they're not getting right now, that is time that I schedule. I actually have to block out in my work day and then hope that people will honor and observe in terms of my colleagues, that so that I can actually engage with them. So I have to, it's that, but that's the feeling of running, right? Is that I'm aware of what energy level and what engagement level is expected of me with the kids' work. And at the same time, I feel for families that were given nothing from their school. It's like, good luck with your kids all day. So it's I don't know that anybody's hit a real sweet spot in terms of expecting how working parents or especially like parents who don't have consistent broadband access, or parents who are essential workers and are not able to be engaged in that degree. But like, that's how my family is doing it. And it's, we're doing okay. We're in like week 8 or so of this, and I feel like we're in a groove.
Yeah,
well, Melissa, oh, go ahead.
I think we hit rock bottom a little bit a couple weeks ago as a family unit, and my husband and I really had to lean into each other and work on our communication and just be like, listen, this is not working for me. And he's like, it's not working for me either. So we had to kind of reconstruct it. And Melissa, one of the things that you've told me repeatedly is grab and go snacks. That has been a lifesaver. And in tandem with that, we've also had to lower our expectations. Like, it's okay that my kids ate 3 granola bars today. We're okay with that. They're still alive. Like, you know, it's not, we've offered fruit. They've also eaten fruit. However, you know, if their meal is an apple and a granola bar and they're happy and they're quiet and they're able to kind of focus on whatever it is that they want to focus on and go build, you know, something that their brother's going to come knock down, great. That is where they need to be right now. And so when our kids were really little, because when the twins were born, we had 5 children under the age of 3. And we used to say that one of our, you know, our gratefulness, like one of the things we're really grateful for is that we could lower our standards and no one could judge us for it. So it's they were alive. Things were great today. Like, we woke up, checked all the boxes, everyone's alive this morning. And then when they went to bed, it was the same thing. And so we kind of had a good laugh about it, but at the same time, it helped us to level set back to those days of during the pandemic, things are not normal. And grab and go snacks has saved us because my kids are always eating. For that matter, I'm always snacking these days. So just having that to go and to just let go of the expectation that we had the meals have to be perfect has really helped.
And that helps because my meals were never perfect to begin with. I'm definitively not known for my cooking in any circles whatsoever. And so to be making all the meals, my husband and I here at home, we're like, oh God, I hope we don't get food poisoning. I'm good at some stuff, but the cooking part is no.
Yeah.
Well, and I wanted to mention to that point of, you know, it all falls along with the expectations that we're putting on ourselves. And Melissa Lee, you've used a term, you used it earlier today, and you and I have talked about it before, that this is not homeschooling. This is crisis schooling. This is not working from home just like we would be, but we have extra coworkers, as you mentioned, Kerri. Like, we are in a state of crisis. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit more of your thoughts that you've did in kind of the lunch and learn that you've done around that crisis schooling thought.
Sure. So I know a lot of people who homeschool. I have great respect for my friends who are homeschoolers. And these folks have chosen the curriculum that they're going to work with on their kids. They are able to follow their children's lead in terms of the level of attention that their children can sustain to work on a specific task or a specific subject. They're able to choose things that their children are interested in. My son is not interested in a story about Betsy Ross right now. He doesn't care. And I have to teach it whether or not he cares about it. And so there's, and also in homeschooling, you'll often compress the day. It's not like a 6 or an 8 hour school day. In homeschooling, you might have a couple of hours a day that you do really sort of intense curriculum, and then the rest of the day is different. And so I want to honor where homeschoolers are. Like, that's not what we are all doing. And we also many of us are working our regular jobs. If we're stay-at-home moms, we may have a partner or a spouse who is home. who also has needs. Like the first, like what really struck me is the first day we were all sort of home and I was, recovered from the flu, and my husband comes in, and like all of my meetings are from like 11 to 2 on my time zone. And my husband comes down during a meeting. He's like, are we going to have lunch? And I was like, this is not the office kitchen. Like I can't do that right now. Like you can have lunch at 10 a.m. or you can have lunch at 3, but like we're not doing that. And so that on top of like we have terrible time zone creep. I keep joking that's like somehow we're like we're like 2 hours off where we were before, because we're going to bed later and we're waking up later because we don't have to be up and out the door at a certain amount of time. So my kids and me, we're rolling into meetings with like, pajamas on the bottom, and nobody's brushed teeth, and there's no deodorant applied, right?
I don't know if that's time zone creep. I am well within my time zone here, and I definitely brush my teeth, but I'm wearing pajama pants, and I will not lie about that. So I don't care what time of the day it is. I will do what I want.
I think meal prep is a huge part of that too. But like, pajamas are fine. That's fine. I'm doing a lot less laundry. I will say that. Poor Melissa's over there, like my laundry is not any better. But that's a lot.
But a lot of dishes. They won't stop.
But to wrap on that, like, so I saw somebody use the phrase crisis schooling, and I was like, yeah, that's what we're doing. Is I am taking the curriculum that my school is able to do via distance learning, and I have to be the one who executes on it and apply it. My children don't have any of the additional supports they would have to get that done, and I don't have the additional supports that I need to help them. And so it's, you are not homeschoolers, folks. We are crisis schoolers right now.
Yep. Not to mention, if you've got extroverts in your children, they're not getting that outlet. They're not getting that feedback that they desperately need. I joke that I'm running my own preschool, but it's, for my oldest daughter, she's like, these people, they're not doing it for me anymore. It's like, I hear you. I will work on a Zoom call for you. Like that's all I got right now. So we'll work with what we've got. But
yep.
So yeah.
We've got a couple questions in here too. We've been talking a lot about kind of that lowering of expectations around what's happening at the home, school, things like that. But Kristen's curious if we're able to keep that lower your expectations mindset as it relates to either your or your child's diabetes management. And I think that's a really important question.
And I recognize Kristen's name, so hi, I'm glad you're here. Does anyone have to answer that or no?
I think it's different. I think Kerri and I are going to have slightly different answers than moms of kids with diabetes.
For sure that.
Like for me, I lowered expectations years ago, first of all.
Before it was cool?
Yeah, man, I could crisis diabetes when nothing was going on. But like I last night, and I posted about this on my own Facebook page. I went to go grab my infusion set was like dangling by a thread. It's the type where you're like, if I could just like maybe stick it, like see if I could just like get another day out of it. And it was not going to happen. So I went and I reached in the box and it's empty. And this is like midnight. Everybody else has gone to bed. And I'm like, okay. And so I look and there are no infusion sets. So I am done. I am out. And I realized, there are enough people with diabetes in the Bay Area where I live, where I could like the next day call somebody and meet up with them and grab something. I'm like, okay, so that's kind of out. And I quickly looked, when is the last time I reordered? Oh, like 5 months ago okay, so like really need to reorder. So I place an order and like do the overnight shipping and it'll be here Monday. And I'm like, okay, so I just got to get through Monday. And I find in like the back of my closet, this one little like 8-year-old infusion set for an old pump. And it just happens to have the same connector as mine. And I was like, here we go. Yeah. And so I am wearing an infusion set that is as old as my last pregnancy. And my son is 8. So it works. It's working. We're fine. That's where my standards are right now. I'm a guy veneered my way through whatever because I don't, just because I think it's going to get here Monday. There's also like, huge ask on our resources right now in terms of shipping services. And so I don't know when I'm going to get it. So here I am, but that's where I am.
Yeah, and in the lowering expectations sort of thing. So I'm of two minds. I'm trying to be gentle with myself and realize that my emotions have always directly impacted my blood sugars. And so if I'm really upset, I go super high, or sometimes randomly super low. So there's no predictability to it. And I'm trying to be like forgiving of myself when I completely screw the whole thing up, or I make big mistakes that I don't account for. So that's side one. But I am actually afraid to let the reins go too much, because I am very up to date on all the concerns if I were to get COVID, how it would net for me. And so I know that the better controlled that I am, and this sounds so like I am on top of things, and I don't mean for it to sound that way. I'm just saying my concern levels are such that I don't want to let my A1C get crazy or my time in range to go way off the rails, because I'm afraid that if I get sick, I won't do well if I'm in that sort of care spot. So I'm fastidious about reordering my supplies out of hoarder panic. That's where I'm a hoarder. We didn't extra buy toilet paper. We were extra buying prescriptions where we could, because that was the thing that I am and was and will forever be the most panicked about. And again, making the disclosure at the beginning that I do have a working relationship with Tandem. They are not responsible for this webinar, and they're not responsible for anything that I say, but I have been using the Control IQ technology since January, and that was before pandemic issues were in place here. And I found that it really improved my time in range. And I'm very grateful to have access to a pump and a CGM with that kind of capability now, because my brain is not completely in diabetes management mode. And it is really useful for me to have something that's either alarming when I'm high or low, or doing some corrections when I'm high or low, because I'm not always thinking about that. I'm busy panicking about 50 other things. And so it's great that technology for me has been a real asset, because it's taking some of that mental load off. And that's so helpful for me when the mental load seems really piled on. So that's that side of it. And then as a kind of a tertiary thing, being able to connect with you guys lightens a lot of that load for me too. And so if I feel guilty about mismanaging my expectations, or like I'm letting too many things slide, or Melissa, have run out of infusion sets, knowing that there is a community, like you've already mentioned, that can either emotionally pick me back up, or can literally chuck an infusion set from their open car window to mine, that brings me a lot of peace. And so that answers a question that's very small in a super broad way, but it's normal to let things go, I think. And it's also okay to stay on top of them as much as you can, because I think that's the way that my body, and hopefully all of our bodies, are going to best weather this chaos.
And you mentioned that you're not going out for anything. I have had to go out to the pharmacy like 10 times in the last 2 months. Either for my children are both on controlled meds that can't be like mail ordered, and that I have to go in every 30 days. And of course they're not on the same schedule as one another. And then my insulin, like I've had to go make sure, but insulin is the thing that I hoard like a bad woman. So I have,
Well, and you're touching on a question here from Lisa, talking about, she had an experience fairly early in the pandemic of not being able to get those supplies. And how have you dealt with the fear of not being able to get those? And I'll say I was also a hoarder of supplies, because as a mom of someone with type 1, as opposed to having type 1 myself, the fear that you talk about, Kerri, about what could happen if she were to get sick, but we didn't have a good control on her blood sugar levels, keeps me up at night. But then it's also with the stress and everything, then that's making everything go crazy too. So trying to balance that and to be kind to ourselves, of we're doing the best that we can. But I for sure 100% dealt with that in the beginning of ordering like everything, stuff we don't even use anymore because we've changed, but just getting everything that I could to make sure that we wouldn't run out. But how are you ladies handling that kind of supply stress and fear?
I'm going to do a big shout out to backup plans right now, because in the event that my technology fails me, do I have a glucose meter and an insulin bottle and syringes in my house? Do I have a prescription for long acting insulin? Like, it's the stuff that I used to think about, not all the time, but maybe once or twice a year, that I needed to make sure was in place before we went into lockdown, because I was afraid that if there was some sort of a gaff up with my tech, that I didn't know how to calculate a basal rate injection. Like, was I up to speed on how to drive diabetes manually versus the automatic that I've been used to? So doing a little re-education helped a lot. And that's where all these crazy Zoom calls have really helped, because there have been so many educators and medical professionals who've been jumping on and sharing those bits of expertise that help me feel both controlled mentally, like, okay, that helps me calm me down, and also gives me the data and the information that I need to plan ahead.
Yeah, we did something similar, Kerri, in that we planned to we went ahead and scheduled a telemedicine visit with our endocrinologist, just to say, hey, we are also lucky to have an AID system. So we have an AID system, but it's been a while and we don't even have a script right now for a long-lasting insulin. Can you please make sure that we have everything we need? And that was a big one for us. I want to go back to expectations really quickly and say that while we've lowered expectations across the board, I think what we also found in my marriage especially was that my husband and I, our stress was coming out sideways as it pertained to diabetes. And so if our son had a high day, like we were really taking that on each other, and we had to really check that emotion and just say, where is this coming from? Is this coming from something that's real? Like in the broad scheme of things, like how high was he? Could we handle this? And I think part of it was that we had it so well dialed in. Like he had his structure, he had his schedule at school, he had a nurse we had an extra set of hands that was a part of our team. And making all those adjustments, and suddenly that schedule is out the window. And so we're seeing we're doing this on a regular basis, even though we're trying to keep it dialed in. I think that in some ways we lowered expectations, but we replaced the expectations with diabetes, and we're having to come back to that now and say, look, as we adjust to our new normal, what is our new set of expectations for diabetes? Knowing that we're in this together, that we are equipping ourselves with a backup plan. We need to let go in some ways of some of that stress, and we have a plan for. We do have a plan. Melissa, you helped us to realize we needed this. We also empowered ourselves by having a plan of, if he does get sick, if he has to go to the hospital, what does that look like? What does home care look like? What does hospital care look like? Who's going to participate in that? Because we have to be split up at that point. Like one parent, if we can, we'll go with him. We hope we can, but some PICUs are shutting that down. So how will we manage this? And having that plan, even if it's just the conversation of mapping it out in our minds, has helped us feel more empowered throughout this whole thing. And that's what we needed here in this house.
And this brings a good segue to, Stacy mentions, hoping that everyone has a local group and have that opportunity and connection. Some people are embarrassed to ask for help, so we need to be checking in with our friends who we know and make sure they have what they need, and offer that opportunity to share supplies, share thoughts and ideas like we are here. And that kind of brings me in our final few moments together of, we've got a bunch of questions about self-care. We're talking a lot about what kind of tips and tricks do we have of taking care of our little mini village now, and the diabetes management, but what are we doing for ourselves? Melissa M., I know you have a handful of different things that you were talking about from a self-care perspective. Well, yes, we can't go have a day at the spa, it's just not a thing, but what are you doing to try and kind of just take that deep breath?
We are trying. I try to do podcasts. I try to walk with my kids in the morning, but I will acknowledge that I will sometimes put at least one earbud in, listen to a podcast, even if it's just half, if they have half of me. But that way, I'm still doing something for myself while being there for my kids. I've had to talk to my kids a lot about presence, and sometimes mommy can't be present with them because while she's there in the room, she needs just a moment for herself. So I'll get my own books out, and then I'll hand out a bunch of books, and they can look at the pictures while mommy reads. And I might only get 10 minutes, but I'm having to really value those 10 minutes. And also, I'm recognizing that my family, my extended family, is needing more. And so it's not just my ordering groceries for people. It's also saying, okay, here's how you do it in the future, or let me put that on auto order for you, so that it just comes to you, and we don't have to, we're not having to kind of have this conversation time and time again, and saving myself that time. There's an Insight app. It's gonna sound crazy, but my local my local yoga studio sent out things that this Insight app has a lot of meditations. It has music to help you sleep if you're having a hard time sleeping. And there's a lot of it available there for free. So please download this app if you are feeling like you're feeling anxiety. Like they have specific meditations to help you through that. And so I try to make time, even if it's 5 minutes in between meetings, where I get on and just do a 3-minute like meditation, just to help me stay centered, and it's a coping mechanism for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also important to think about what we consume right now in terms of media and information and news. I'm someone who feels less anxiety the more I know, and so I will consume a lot of news in chunks and then I'll feel better. I know plenty of people who feel worse the more they consume of it. And so knowing what your personal tolerance level is for that, where I have to turn off is we've, especially being involved in the diabetes online community for, over 10 years now, like, I need to know to what degree I will participate in things online and how my own social feeds will look to me. And I have been blocking and unfriending or unfollowing or hiding things that cause me stress, such as family members who I don't feel are taking it as seriously as I'm taking it, or who are perpetuating, false narratives or something that upset me. Rather than engage with it, I'm learning how to turn them off so that I don't have that additional stressor in my life. And then I'm watching other people who I feel are not making that choice, and that's their choice to make. But and seeing their anxiety go way high, and so deciding for yourself to what degree you will engage is a very empowering move. And I don't know that we stop often enough to take that breath and say, oh, this is bad for me, and be able to step away.
Yeah. I would add to that too, Melissa, it's the format in which we process some of this information. Like I had to switch, one of the reasons I switched to podcasts, to be honest with you, was because my eyes needed to break. And so the format that I switched to. The other thing is I've done a lot of webinars lately, more webinars than I probably ever imagined taking, but there are a lot of great free services out there. Forte Foundation, Herdacity are a couple that are focused on empowering women in a lot of ways, but empowering people throughout this pandemic to understand how people, what we can do as leaders within our own organizations or our own homes, how we can take some of those lessons that are already well known out there and really serve ourselves. And so I've been attending a lot of those, and I will say that that's also helped me in terms of the format and getting away from just the constant news channels.
It's a really good point about the format. I mean, I typically am a voracious reader. I mean, I'm reading 1 to 2 books a week, normal life. I haven't finished a single book in this pandemic, and you would think like that's ridiculous. You should be flying through them, but I can't process that in the same way. So similarly for me, shorter form podcasts and webinars and things of that nature have really provided me an opportunity to still kind of get away, but not read, because for some reason that's just not working for my brain right now. And walking has been big, and we do a lot of family walks, and that's great, but it's really nice too to just take a walk by myself, where even without the AirPods in, and there's just no noise, and to just, because that's the thing, we've talked about a lot, there's just a constant noise. And so finding a quiet space, even if it's 3 minutes, makes a big difference.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add something that hasn't been brought up yet, but I definitely am not ashamed to bring it up, is anxiety medications. And so I have taken anxiety medications for flying for years, because flying is not my favorite thing and probably won't be doing it for a while. So that seems to be off the table for a bit. But I did talk to my clinician at the beginning of this whole issue about prescribing or allowing me to take that medication when I'm feeling cooked up about the pandemic side. And some people really agree with that as a treatment method, and other people really buck up against it. But for me, knowing that that is an option that I have when the anxiety and the stress is feeling like it's starting to really impact my physical health, is to take care of my mental health in that way. And so people who are taking medications or consulting with mental health professionals, and that broad gamut of things. If that is what you need to do to take good care of yourself and to be okay, there's absolutely no shame in doing that. And then when people bring up things like spa days, I've never been into spa days. I don't want anyone to touch my toes, and I'm uncomfortable with having anybody like put seaweed on my face. I find that uncomfortable personally. So like my outlets for this stuff have gotten slightly weirder. I saw on Instagram that Jen Hansen from Connected in Motion had bought a weaving loom. And I thought it looked so weird and so crazy. And there's one on my dining room table right now because I was so inspired by the repetitive motion of doing something that felt unrelated to diabetes, unrelated to the pandemic, could be fun and useful, but that nice repetitive motion of making something really does it for me. And so I'm trying to, I hate to use the phrase lean in, I absolutely loathe it, but I'm trying to really embrace the crafty side of myself because that brings me a lot of mental peace and it makes me feel better. And I do know, and diabetes has definitively taught me that when my oxygen mask is on first, my family does better. So going full circle on the whole self-care thing, if I'm taking the time to be what others may perceive as selfish, I'm doing us all a better service in the long run. So taking care of myself and being a little bit selfish is a good thing, whether it's taking a minute to make sure that my supplies are reordered or to check my blood sugar or to treat that low or to weave some weird face covering, whatever, like whatever is making it better. This is a pandemic. We're not, I think it was a New Yorker cartoon that showed a guy in a boat, in a rowboat surrounded by sharks. And the caption underneath was something along the lines of, now's a great time to finish your novel. It's like, I don't know if it is. I'm not sure if this is the right time for me to be really putting the pressure on myself to achieve more and do more. If that ends up happening, great. But if it doesn't, that is also okay. We are trying to survive. And then whatever means we get to that survival point necessary, then let's just like do that. Is that okay?
That's absolutely. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that because I've seen, we've seen both sides of it, especially on the social media side, which to your point earlier, Melissa Lee, I have cut myself way back on that. And that's done really good things for my personal psyche and potentially for some friendships when maybe I respond a little too quickly. But to what you're saying, Kerri, you see people like, now is the time to learn French or to become, this yogi master. And it's not, because that's not where we are. And we have guilt around it. Stacy's saying in the Q&A, she also isn't reading and there's guilt, and we need to find ways to release that guilt because we aren't doing anyone a service if we're just adding to the pressure of all these really scary, hard, difficult times. So
yeah, stuff like guilt has to be tabled for the time being, especially, but hopefully permanently. And things like judging others and being crumbs to one another and going back to that garbage can thing, like now does not seem like the best time to be jerks to one another. This seems like the right time to be coming together. And this community in particular is united around diabetes. We have a whole bunch of differences, but we are in that particular circumstance together. So why not be as supportive and giving and gentle with one another as we can? If that means blocking or certain posts or whatever so that you can continue to interact with people that you disagree with, do whatever you need to do. But we are united by that one common thread, and we should really try to play that out because it's going to be a long haul and we need one another like a lot.
Well, and and to that point, like throughout our society, we're not all fighting the same battle. Like I had mentioned to you guys when we were prepping for this, like Lady Gaga had come out and said, like, listen, all these celebrities are talking about how we're all in this together. And she's like, I want to recognize that my fight is not your fight. And that if you're a single mom with kids trying to manage this, that's not the same fight I have. If you are a healthcare worker and you are daily dealing with death and disease and trying to stay alive, that's not the fight that I'm having right now. And so, really acknowledging all of the people that aren't represented by the four of us and making sure that we can keep that common thread of diabetes to bring our community together, because this is a time where we really risk splintering over things like, whether we want to reopen this or that, or our politics or anything like that. So,
ladies, this has been amazing. We have 1 minute left, and in this, as our kind of final thought, I want to go around. If everyone can say, what is one thing, Kerri, you just alluded to this of, what do you want to take out of this? What is your silver lining? What do you hope that you have changed in your life as a family or individually during this pandemic, that when this is all over, you intend to hold on to?
Oh, I have to answer that first? Jeez.
You don't have to go first. If you want me to go first, I can go first. My one is the way that my family evaluates time. We have always typically been a very busy family, always running from here to there. And now we have found really new, fun ways to just have fun at home as a family. And I do intend to hold on to that when we're on the other side of this.
I think the one thing that I'm hoping that I can hang on to the whole time is to appreciate people who are not often appreciated. So I opened this by saying I was so grateful that we had gotten our grocery order. I hadn't thought every day about how hard that service is to deal with people in a public setting, to provide what I now view and I hope is always viewed as an essential service. I hope that I am able to continue to remind myself and demonstratively show people in those jobs that, like, I'm very grateful for what they do, whether they're the nurse or the lady that works at Walmart or the guy who's picking up the trash that came through today. It's like, thank you guys for doing that, because you're keeping the world rotating and you're keeping people healthy and well. And so appreciation for all different kinds of service jobs, I hope, is something that I can hang on to. And as a former longtime waitress, I'm surprised that I forgot about that a little bit. I'm disappointed in myself. I bust a lot of gross tables and I definitely should, you know what I mean? Like everybody needs to be utmost appreciated, big time.
Well, one of the things that I said, we've also on the Tidepool blog posted a really great blog with more of the thoughts, because we're not all the moms at Tidepool, we're just a few, and so we asked people the same question on our team about what they were taking out of this. And one of the things that I said, and that was flexibility. Like, my kids need a lot of practice with flexible thinking and being flexible about, like, oh, your plans have changed, or no, that dance class can't happen anymore, that drama class can't happen anymore, but oh, there's this other art class we can sign up for online. And really, like, being flexible about, like, oh, that brand of cookies, I couldn't get it in the delivery order, and so I got this other one, and you're just gonna have to live with a different cookie. You know, so flexibility, this has been, while unfortunate, it's been extraordinary practice for my family to practice flexible thinking.
Yeah, along those same lines, I think for me, Suzanne, it's the power of change. I'm horrible at change. I don't like it. This has been a massive change to adapt to, and it's shown my kids that we can do it. And it's also shown my kids that there's a grieving process to change, and then that's okay. It's okay for all of us to grieve in our own individual ways and to come back together and build it back up again. And so that for me has been my silver lining.
Great. Awesome. You ladies are awesome. Spending the last hour with you has been great for my own self-care. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to everyone out there for joining us. Happy early Mother's Day to all of you. And thank you again. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Kerri.